Live from Johannesburg, this is Tonight with Jane Dutton. Investing in coal, but at what cost? As China looks to pump billions into our economy, is South Africa selling its soul, or rather saving a stagnating economy? Those are my questions. What are yours? You can contact us with the details at the bottom of your screen, but first let's get the top stories from Shahan.
Thanks, Jane. Appreciate it. This is our top story tonight. The Gauteng government is vacating all its buildings in Johannesburg. The decision comes after 3 firefighters died while battling a blaze in the city. The building is used by several provincial departments. Premier David Makhado says the process to move offices has started.
We have 7 other buildings, and I have taken a decision that we will have to find temporary accommodation for staff in all those buildings. As things stand, we don't know what the cause of the fire is. Fortunately, there's a staff member who was in the room where the fire started. The police are going to interview that staff member who was there. We will know exactly what caused the fire, but in general, we have several buildings that we have been decommissioning. As soon as the report comes out and says this building is not in a good state, we decommission the building. Others, we don't decommission them, we get them renovated.
Steinhoff's former CEO, Marcus Juster, is claiming innocence, saying he had nothing to do with his company's collapse. It's the first public appearance since he abruptly resigned in December over accounting irregularities. The scandal led to the company's share price plunging by 95%. Juster fielded questions from Parliament's Standing Committee on Public Accounts. He's blaming the company's board for the collapse of the share price and says he was unaware of any irregularities.
Lastly, and thank you for giving me the time to give my recollection of the events that led to that day in December, I want to place on record that when I left Steinhoff on the 4th of December, I was not aware of any accounting irregularity, what they refer to in the books of Steinhoff.
Oral presentations to review Section 25 of the Constitution took place in Parliament today. This is the second phase of the process following the conclusion of public hearings. Agri-SA believes amending Section 25 will not bring about any change, but the National African Farmers Union disagrees.
The law that took place then, that is 1913 Land Act, which of course, ladies and gentlemen, used the very same Section 25 to dispossess the majority of this land. The question is, how do we deal with it in a constitutional democracy? The second issue is the property valuations. Respectively so, you will know that when the homelands were created, our people were not compensated. And nobody is mentioning that. It has got nothing to do with the color of anybody. All of us, I believe, at least for myself, that we are all children of God. So therefore, Section 25(3) of the valuations need to be amended as well.
And the ANC says it fears going into next year's election in recession. The party is calling on government to immediately release stimulus packages to boost the economy, which contracted by 0.7%. The ANC says concern about policy shifts are unwarranted and that investor concerns over land expropriation without compensation are misplaced. The party says its position is being confused with that of the EFF.
There's demonstrable evidence across the world that there's a correlation between economic growth and electoral support. It's not only a South African phenomenon. Obviously, we would be worried a bit if we were going to go into an election with an economy in recession. Our approach on on expropriation without compensation is not nationalization, but expropriation for redistribution.
Those are the headlines. It's back to Jane.
Thank you for that, Shahan. China wants South Africa's coal. It's promising to pump billions into the industry. The economic giant already has its eyes on Limpopo's Makhado coal mine. But the rest of the world is moving towards clean energy, and South Africa has a plan that includes a greener energy mix. So why are we still investing so heavily in coal? My guests tonight are NOM's Phillip Vilakazi, energy analyst, Chris Yelland, and Groundwork's Bobby Peake, and he joins us via Skype. Very good to have all three of you with us. Mr. Vilakazi, I should imagine this is good news for your workers.
Probably yes, even the country itself when coming to issues of our current state of affairs economically. As a parent, as a leader, it becomes apparent. If you drill deep into since 1880, when the product or the mineral called coal was discovered, you would then make a calculation that it gives you 138 years. And whatever is going on now, you need to understand in everything that you develop, you can't leave human life behind. South African unemployment rate is so high, and the most contributing part of it are the academics, mostly the young people. And obviously, any investor who comes to South Africa with an intention to boost the economy, to adhere to the statutes of the South African rules, who else can say no? Especially from where I'm standing as a leader of a trade union.
Chris Yelland, we'll get to the economics a little bit later, but dealing with employment here, do you think the numbers are real? Are we realistic when we think about what it is that is going to be happening as far as workers are concerned, do you think?
I think we have to be careful about thinking that anything is going to happen. What we've seen is just a cooperation agreement on the subject, and this is very, very far from a real project yet. And there's a lot of water that has to flow in the bridge before it becomes a real project. So
not just largesse, but there's a lot of detail that has to be covered.
There seems to me that there's a parallel universe out there where common sense and logic don't seem to apply. You see, you have the Limpopo Industrial Development Agency. Limpopo was really on the bones of its backside not so long ago under administration. And it's talking about a 4,600 megawatt new coal-fired plant. Now, a plant like that, sunk Eskom and put it in its current position. I'm not sure whether the Limpopo province has the balance sheet for this, number one. Number two, there is
so are you saying that they're possibly taking on something that's not sustainable or that's not even viable?
Absolutely, and not just that. You have to remember, there is a national government process that looks at energy procurement. This is the Integrated Resource Plan for Electricity. And in the new IRP, there is no new coal other than 2 IPPs, small IPPs, that have been forced in, not for reasons of jobs, not for reasons of price, not for reasons of CO2 emission, not for reasons of water use, and not for reason of employment. In fact, they have been forced into the mix because they are contractually bound. They don't actually want that in the mix, but they have to put it in because they're contractually bound, because the bidders have been announced, there's been a public procurement process. So I would say that this is completely out of step and in some kind of a parallel universe with the reality of energy procurement in South Africa.
Bobby Peake, do you think we are talking about a parallel universe here? Is that what we're just about to enter? Or do you think China's interest could really have a dynamic and positive impact on our economy and employment?
Good evening, Jen, and good evening to the fellow panelists. This morning I tweeted the presidency and I asked the presidency on behalf of Groundwork and Life After Coal, could we see the memorandums of understanding? Could we see the cooperation agreements? Because I think until we see these cooperation agreements in a process of open democracy, as has been mentioned, we're living in a parallel universe. Somebody is doing something somewhere where the workers, the people that are depending upon a new economy in this country, depending on an economy that services the poor, they don't get to understand and get to have a say in this. So I think, yes, we are living in a parallel economy. And I think the reality is we must remember that Medupi and Kusile, the two big coal-fired power stations that we have now, those coal-fired power stations started off at 30 billion rand each around 2005. That was Alec Owen's statements. Today, Kusile is costing us, in terms of finish, until cost to the end of product or end of production, 225 billion rand. So you can see how this has escalated. And finally, I just think, if we look at the type of debt that we're in now, the rand today was fighting to stay below 16 rand to the dollar. Pravin Gordhan, when he was finance minister, got us into a deal with the World Bank that gave us $3.75 billion to build Medupi. And because of that loan, we are in a precarious strait. So we are saying any agreement with China that puts us into debt could be considered odious debt. And so we need an open democracy to protect ourselves and to protect workers and communities in the country.
Mr. Vilakazi, your responses to that? And do you think that the worker is possibly not getting the sort of say that they should in this deal, these deals, if they go ahead?
You see, maybe let me clarify this thing. I understand the two gentlemen who are putting a view here. We need to start somewhere. My opening said, since 1880, in 1895, when this product was discovered in Witbank, for an example, around Witbank, Emelo, and Secunda, one can ask a simple question. We must not abuse democracy. Who did know the details of the agreement by then, by the very same investors? We have got a very constitutional democracy where people
sorry, you say we've got to start somewhere. I mean, is this the right way to start, though? I mean, isn't it rather antiquated? Aren't there better areas that we should be looking at, more progressive areas?
It's quite correct for a parent to go out and look for what can feed the kids. And if they criticize having that on the table. We have got a system that, I'm talking from Labour's point of view, I'm not a workerist, I'm a member of the community. I will talk on the part of the community if needs be. But for now, I want to clarify. We welcome the investments. And the only thing that we need to look into is that every investor who comes into South Africa is not coming here to be abusive. We have got a very clear legislative framework when coming to issues of regulating the relationship of employer-employees. In as far as that is concerned, we are clear. And our responsibility as a trade union is to behave as a watchdog of wrongdoers.
Can I pause you there for a moment, because we've got a call on the line from Paul. Grant, go ahead.
Hi, Jane. A quick question. We've got Sasol 1, Sasol 2, clean burning Sasol, making petrol from coal. Question is, why are we exporting our coal as a commodity when we have the ability, the people, the factories, and the raw material to make our own fuel from coal? It beggars belief that we sell our coal and then on a weakening rand bring in crude oil to make expensive petrol. Our president has said, let's add value. So let's add value to our coal, and why don't we export petrol?
Thanks, Grant.
If there's an obvious answer, I'd like to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
South Africa produces a small part of its liquid fuel requirements, not its full amounts, and there simply is not the capacity, the production capacity at Sasol to produce more without massive investments, which will be highly carbon dioxide emitting technologies, when South Africa is committed to reducing its CO2 emissions. These are international commitments. This is what I can't understand about this parallel universe in Limpopo, that they are looking at 4,600 megawatts of new coal power at a time when South Africa, as a nation, has made international commitments to reduce its CO2 emissions. The two are just totally contradictory. And to be frank, South Africa needs new coal power like it needs a hole in the head. About 80% of all the electricity in South Africa comes from coal. We need less coal power, more flexible power, We do not need more coal power at all. We've got too much in the
without
mix.
coal at the moment, we'd be in the dark, wouldn't we, if you look at Eskom?
I'm not saying we must switch off the coal power stations, but we shouldn't build new coal power stations, and we should allow the old ones to naturally come to the end of their life over a period of decades, and in the process manage a just transition of South Africa away to a clean future where we can redeploy and retrain jobs. And this is not something that happens overnight. This is going to happen over 2 or 3 decades. So we've got plenty of time to manage a just transition.
Mr. Speaker, is that the way to go, from an environment point of view, from a clean air point of view, and sustainability?
If we have to look at economic development for South Africa, and particularly with regards to how do we create an economic development system that services people and services the workers in South Africa? China employs 3.6 million people in its renewable industry, and I think that's even a low figure. Why is China exporting and importing coal technology? Why doesn't China rather invest in South Africa with renewable energy, building those renewable energy plants in South Africa to ensure that South Africans are employed and that we can get energy onto the grid that is clean, that is affordable for people, and that does not destroy the land? Because we must remember that coal and the mining of it and the burning of it destroys the land. The air pollution costs in South Africa, externalization, just from one pollutant, is 35 billion rand a year. The water cost for Kusile itself, the externalized water costs in terms of the acid mine drainage, the purification plants to clean up the water, all of that eventually is going to cost us possibly up to 60 billion rand a year. So I think there are better ways to do it. There are cheaper ways to do this. And critically, there are ways to get more workers working if we look at an alternative and a just transition economy. And that means...
Yeah, okay. Let me bring you, Mr. Vilakazi. I mean, what do you make of that model there, that business plan? It seems to be taking on in many parts of the world, possibly not in the US, that renewable energy is the way to go, that you possibly will bring in a bigger workforce eventually. Shouldn't that be the aim for workers, the longevity in that?
You see, another part that I hear many of South Africans are struggling to face as a reality is the kind of readiness of our own people in terms of skills and knowledge. If you can blame whoever is alive now, you will be wrong, because the first area is to say, is South African educational system or the current workforce ready to can be renewed? My colleague here raised an issue to say, we need to start somewhere. The first thing is to prepare the kind of workforce and the universe we're operating in, to say, South Africa, why must we be price takers? Why must we depend from other people? And if we are starting something that is making other people not to understand, it's fine. It's an open discussion to say, good people, are we having enough skills? Do we have soldiers that can take on this renewable...
Shouldn't people be skilled up?
Yes. And the fact of the matter is, if I can tell you now, I'm a product of the mining industry, for our own information. This industry has made a lot of damage in the country. You go all over the show, there are ghost towns which are caused by this. As a result of this kind of discussions, our people do discuss for the sake of discussion. They do not discuss planning for the future. That's why we are worried. I'm saying to you, mining industry for coal only has operated for 138 years. Many decades, like you said. But why didn't the owners by then have the idea like the question you're raising now? And now we're starting here to say, let us beneficiate from the coal that will be mined in Limpopo.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there again. We've got another caller, Manny from Glen Vista. Go ahead, please, Manny.
Hi.
Hi, Manny. What's your question?
Hi, good evening. I disagree with Chris earlier, and I have the belief that as Africans, we need to find ways and means to use our resources for the benefit of our people.
Yes.
What is happening, and has been happening for some time now, we're allowing outside countries, we're giving them more power than they already have.
Yes.
And we're making South Africa, and in essence, we're making Africa poorer. You know? So our leadership need to think out of the box and stop relying on countries that don't really have the interest of Africans at heart.
Okay, thanks, Manny. All right, thinking out of the box.
Entirely with the concept that we should be using our natural resources that have been bestowed upon us to the best effect of our economy and our people and the development of South Africa. The point is that our best energy resources are solar and wind. These are massive resources that are significantly better than those of other countries. And we should be using them because they provide us the least cost option, together with backup in the form of gas to power and energy storage. The combination of wind plus solar PV plus flexible power generation, gas, and energy storage provides us the least cost, reliable electricity, dispatchable baseload electricity going forward. This is the least cost for new plant. It's not going to be lower cost than plant that was built 30 years ago. But if you compare it as a technology to the other two options, coal and nuclear, it is the least cost way of delivering reliable quality electricity.
Okay,
and these are
put that to
natural
Mr.
resources.
Do you think that's the way to go? And I also wonder what sort of impact that would have on the economy, the communities living in those areas.
The important thing to understand is, if we're going to talk about a beneficiation economy for South Africa, Groundwork, Centre for Environmental Rights, EarthLife, the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, and many other unions have been calling for socially owned renewable energy. So it's not some private entity, it's not privatized electricity, it's not a company, it's not a foreign government that owns our electricity, but it's the people, it's our government, that we can work at having renewable energy owned by us. So not only do we become consumers, but that municipalities with people can become producers. Therein lies an economy that we generate for ourselves, and no money is going to be leaving our shore. So that's really important. And I also just want to briefly reflect on what mining has done for South Africa. What mining has done for South Africa is asbestosis. What mining has done is silicosis. People in coal mines, workers have black lung. There's acid mine drainage in Witbank, in neighborhoods. The land in Mpumalanga is becoming less fertile and has been destroyed because of coal and mining. And we then talk about the constitutional process protecting us, and we have the Center for Applied Legal Studies that very clearly indicates to us that the social labor plans of government and of mining industries is a joke and a farce. And the unions know this. So we cannot depend on the present mining system, and especially coal. It does not provide us what we need for a future and a just transition.
Okay, Mr. Vilakazi, I mean, two very different schools of thought here on this panel. How do you meld the two so that we have a workable plan for the future?
Maybe just to be out of what the latter speaker raised, compliance is an issue, but at the same time, you can't be a player and a referee. The system of our democracy needs a serious engineering. And the definition of beneficiation and the definition of community, including but not limited to issues of what is it that the mining industry before 1994 and post-94, what's the difference? It's a question that we must ask ourselves. And as a trade union, very historic for that matter, we have been demanding that the method that whoever brought the idea to mine in South Africa has never been with the interest of people at heart. It was very slavery. It's now where there is a new dawn, in so to speak, because there are some social coherence, even though the unity of our own people, including ourselves as trade unions. The focus is different today. People depend on what fits them than what will fit the future. In trying to put the ball together, here we need to say, whatever comes as new, we need to see before the sword turning, what is it that is for the people? Because I can tell you now, You have got a mining house which has been given a mining rights, but it operates more than 5 shafts.
Okay, Mr. Vilakazi, I'm going to have to wrap it up there. I'm afraid, is it a parallel universe or a reality? Good to get your thoughts. Mr. Vilakazi, Mr. Peake and Mr. Yelland, thank you. How do young people choose to act when they want to bring about change in society? Global research has found a new trend. We are live in Washington next.